if I can bring you in at this point as someone who is interested in ethical business investing. How do you see things?
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing me to the conversation. To me, the rush back to fossil fuels sends a lamentable message to the youth, particularly the youth of the Global South and the African continent, of a lack of consistency from those in power, the decision makers in power, and particularly in the Global North, in their incapacity in committing to sustainable development goals. And it's a delay that we truly cannot afford and we can truly not accept, because it feels like we still accept an extractive approach to the economy that is completely irrelevant. And as a child of the Global South that has taken her own risks to start companies coming back to the continent to kind of work together with other creatives, entrepreneurs that are shouldering so much, there's this feeling, this shared feeling of anger and frustration, somehow sort of feeling disempowered by such decisions. And at the same time, the inner knowledge that we eventually have to continue the work ourselves. And then entrepreneurs that have started the work at their community level, eventually working together at a cross-regional level, Pan-African level, and so on, crafting, co-designing solutions. Eventually, we have to continue inspiring people that have the resources to feed into what we're doing. But this trust we cannot feed anymore. I mean, it's time. It's really time, and this anger and frustration have to be heard. It's about the next generations at this point, and it's about really showing up to the responsibility of what we can really build much better for the future.
Let me ask you if you think it is avoidable, the current rush to fossil fuels, as a short-term solution to a big crisis. Do you have alternatives that you can offer in the short term?
You know, all solutions are very possible, and it's about courage at the end of the day. When we look back at what the last 2 years have brought, if you all remember the start of the pandemic, the slowdown, everything was stopped with all the consequences that we know today, eventually brought us some sort of a spaciousness to think about possibilities and a higher level of awareness and consciousness of, yes, we can stop traveling around the world and doing technology in a way that is mindless and not aligned with a purpose that is serving our best interests, and eventually kind of rethink. So I do think that we have to prioritize. Yes, we cannot kind of recreate the conditions of stopping any sort of mobility, any sort of infrastructure building, but eventually what we still accept will continue, and if we continue accepting a slower phasing out, then we're not directing the resources in the right way. So we have to be courageous enough to just completely shift and reprioritize every resource. When I say resource, it's not just financial resource, of course, it's brain resource, it's creativity, it's our capacity to co-design, co-create, co-implement, build capacity, as was said in the previous session by Mamadou, and then work tirelessly with that aim, with that goal. It's very possible, but it takes courage. And at this point, it's about asking ourselves the right questions. Do decision makers around the world now today that hold these possibilities of making such decisions, are they courageous enough? And if not, can they be inspired by those that are courageous enough, that are doing the groundwork as we speak?
Thank you. Let me ask you, what do you expect from COP? What do you expect to see more resources going to adaptation? Do you expect, are you optimistic about the outcome?
I've heard everything that was said so far about the socioeconomic kind of analysis of the crisis and the situation. I think my expectation from COP is to be bold enough to rethink the governance of climate justice and climate change. It's not enough to think about mitigation and adaptation. It's about now rethinking the institutions, because the only expectable outcome of this COP is to have a bold rethinking of those institutions. NDCs are not enough, because nations do not weigh the same, obviously, in this conversation. So perhaps we can think of many other ways to have every entity show up to the reasonable contribution that they can make. I'll give you an example that sustains this thought. A few months ago, I was invited in New York, and I sat at a C-level kind of a conversation at the Bank of New York, and they shared how they managed $43 trillion of wealth. And whenever I started sharing what I've witnessed in the African in the African context of change makers creating sustainable companies or trying to create sustainable companies and not finding enough solutions, it felt like Africa was so far away and was an afterthought, and it was still kind of a philanthropic maybe approach. It was really remote, and it was a headache and a heartache, because you would say a very tiny percentage of this money going to entrepreneurs that are doing the work or are ready to do the work and work at a community level and work with governments and so on would change radically. So I appreciate what was said earlier about being able to bring in the private sector, but then let's create the governance, and let's create the governance with the positive nudges and the negative nudges, as in KPIs and companies discarded having taxes or whatever mechanisms that we have at hand to really make it clear that climate justice is the priority, and that we're all working together towards creating a low carbon, resource efficient and climate resilient future for everyone around this planet. That's my expectation of COP. And yes, I remain optimistic because there's no other way. We have to do the work.
Do you actually expect that COP will be a forum for some of these ideas? Do you think that they will have a place in the discussion?
I've never attended the COP organization or conference, and I'm learning at the same time from what I'm hearing here. My hope is that yes, it won't be just closed kind of high-level conversations between institutions that represent their legacy, but rather a capacity to do and develop participatory approaches. So all the side conversations that commit to a process whereby the youth, which eventually will be recipients of those decisions, can check and hold accountable all those institutions. And my hope is that the project will be heavily present and invested and committed over time. So it's about the after COP, if I may say.